You know, friends, I've always been fascinated by those wee folks, those magical little creatures that seem to live just at the edge of our vision. Leprechauns with their mischievous grins, fairies dancing on flower petals, and gnomes who might not be statues after all. There's something so enchanting about the idea that the whole tiny world exists alongside, isn't there? I remember the first time I saw a gnome. Well, not actually. It was on TV. I saw a movie called The Gnome Mobile. I might have been 6 or 8. I was hooked. To be honest, I don't even remember what the story was about. I was just fascinated by these cool little people. It wasn't long after that I got in trouble for borrowing some little garden gnomes out of a neighbor's yard. I got in a wee bit of trouble for that. Don't do that. Not only do the big people not like it, the gnomes, when you're not looking, might just get up and run away. Those are magical little beings, aren't they? But let's explain gnomes and leprechauns both just a little bit. They're both about as tall as my knee. Can you imagine? What if you saw one? But they're very different. Gnomes are round-bellied guardians of the garden with pointed red caps and fluffy white beards, much bigger than mine, who tend to flowers while you sleep, leaving behind tiny footprints in the morning dew and whispers of magic in your garden. Leprechauns are emerald-clad tricksters with twinkling eyes who make the most beautiful shoes in the world. They guard pots of gold at the rainbow's end, and they might grant you 3 wishes if you're quick enough to catch one. But be careful. They're clever as the Irish wind and twice as slippery. Today's story comes from the rich tradition of Irish folklore, where leprechauns are known not just for their gold, but for the lessons that they often teach to humans who encounter them. This story is called The Leprechaun Gold. And it reminds us that sometimes the most valuable treasures aren't the ones that glitter and shine. In a small village in the county Kerry, Ireland, lived a shoemaker named Padraig O'Brien. His cottage sat on the edge of town, its whitewashed walls brightened with window boxes and overflowering with cheerful red geraniums, and its thatched roof resembling a cap pulled low against the frequent Irish rain. Despite his legendary skill with leather, Padraig lived simply. You see, he had a habit that frustrated the more practical villagers. He often gave away his work to those who couldn't pay. Padraig O'Brien, his neighbor Mrs. Finnegan would scold, hands planted firmly on her ample hips. "You'll not eat good intentions for supper. How do you expect to survive the winter with your generous heart, but empty pockets?" Padraig would just smile, the wrinkles around his bright blue eyes deepening. "Now, Mrs. Flanagan, have I starved yet? The good Lord provides, doesn't he? And young Colin needed those boots for school more than I needed an extra loaf on my table." One crisp autumn evening, as Padraig was walking home from delivering a pair of riding boots to the manor house, a strange tapping sound caught his ear. Curiously, he followed it deep into the ancient oak forest. There, in a small clearing, bathed in the last golden light of day, sat a tiny man, no taller than Padraig's knee. He wore a waistcoat of emerald green, buttoned over a shirt the color of clotted cream. Upon his head sat a hat with a buckle that gleamed like pure gold. But most remarkable were his shoes. Tiny, exquisite little things that the little man was repairing with a miniature hammer. Moving quietly, Padraig crept forward. The leprechaun was so absorbed in his work that he didn't even notice until Padraig's shadow fell across him. Quick as lightning, Padraig dropped his lunch sack quickly over the leprechaun, scooping him up. "Let me out this instant, you indignant giant!" The voice surprisingly deep for such a small creature. Padraig carefully opened the top of the sack, keeping a firm grip. The leprechaun's face appeared red with fury, his white beard bristling like an angry hedgehog. "I am Finnegan O'Shaughnessy, Master Cobbler to the Fairy Court," he declared. "And yes, I must give you my gold if you keep hold of me. But perhaps we could come to another arrangement." "What sort of arrangement?" Padraig asked cautiously. Finnegan's gestured toward his tiny workbench, which had toppled when Padraig captured him. Beside it lay a half-repaired shoe that would fit a child's doll. "These slippers belong to the Fairy Queen herself," Finnegan explained. "If she cannot dance at tomorrow night's moonlight ball, there will be no dew on the morning grass, and your farmer's crops will suffer." Studying the delicate slipper, Padraig could see the stitching had come undone. The special thread woven from moonbeams and spider silk, Finnegan claimed, was nearly invisible in the fading light. "I might be able to help," Padraig offered. "I've some skill with fine stitching." "Your great clumsy human fingers? You'd destroy it completely," Finnegan scoffed. "Not so," Padraig replied, offended. "Last week I repaired lace on the Countess' dancing slippers. Thread as fine as cobwebs it was." After a moment's consideration, Finnegan said, "If you can repair the Queen's slipper by midnight, I'll give you something far more valuable than gold. But you must release me so I can gather more moonbeam thread from the lake." Padraig hesitated. All the stories warn never to let a captured leprechaun out of your sight. "How do I know you'll return?" "I am bound by the old magic to keep my word," Finnegan replied with dignity. "Besides, you have my tools and the Queen's slipper. No true craftsman abandons his tools." There was truth in that. Padraig carefully set the leprechaun down. While Finnegan disappeared into the deepening twilight, Padraig gathered the tiny tools and the half-finished slipper. They were unbelievably light in his weathered hands, as if made from butterfly wings and wishes. Setting his spectacles on his nose, Padraig began to work by the light of the rising moon. The task was challenging. The thread seemed to flow like liquid silver through his fingers, sometimes visible, sometimes disappearing altogether, except for a faint glow. The slipper itself was crafted from material unlike leather Padraig had ever worked with, soft as a sigh, but strong as steel. When Finnegan returned with more thread, he watched Padraig's careful sketches with growing respect. "You've a deft hand for a human," he admitted grudgingly. As the night deepened, the two cobblers shared tales of their craft. Finnegan spoke of the shoes he'd made for fairy royalty over his 300 years, while Padraig described the generations of village families whose feet he had shod. "The young ones are my favorite," Padraig confessed as he tied off the last perfect stitch. "Their faces, when they see their first pair of new shoes, oh, 'tis better than payment." "You often give away your work, I think," Finnegan observed. Padraig shrugged. "Some need the shoes more than I need the coin." "And yet you captured me for my gold," Finnegan said with a raised eyebrow. Padraig's weathered cheeks flushed. "Winter's coming," he admitted. "The roof needs thatching, and my stores are low." After examining the perfectly repaired slipper, Finnegan reached into his waistcoat pocket and withdrew what appeared to be a simple silver thimble, very tiny. "My treasure to you," he said solemnly. Disappointment crashed over Padraig. "A thimble? After all this work?" Seeing his expression, Finnegan chuckled. "Don't be judging gifts by their appearance, Cobbler. This is no ordinary thimble. 'Tis made from the first moonbeam of the midsummer eve and the last star of the winter solstice. When worn while you work, it will guide your fingers with the combined skill of every master cobbler who ever lived." Padraig accepted the thimble with new reverence, feeling it tingle against his skin. "Thank you, but I still hope for some gold with winter approaching." "The magic comes with a condition," Finnegan explained. "With each shoe that you make using this power, set aside the first coin you are paid as an offering to the fairy folk. Place it under the old rowan tree at the crossroads, and I promise you, you will never want for anything again." As the sound of tiny bells filled the air, the fairy court began approaching. Padraig hurried home, the magical thimble clutched tightly in his palm. The next day, the mayor's wife arrived with an urgent commission: dancing shoes for her daughter's wedding. As Padraig slipped the magical thimble onto his finger, his hands moved with impossible grace. By evening, he had created the most beautiful pair of dancing shoes in all of Ireland. The mayor's wife paid him twice his asking price without hesitation. Remembering Finnegan's instructions, Padraig placed the first coin beneath the rowan tree that night. In the days that followed, Padraig's reputation spread far beyond the village. Nobility sought his craftsmanship, paying handsomely. Yet, for every fine commission, Padraig also crafted shoes for those in need. Orphaned children, struggling widows, old soldiers with empty pockets, and always he placed the first coin from each creation beneath the rowan tree. Winter came, but Padraig's cottage remained warm, his pantry inexplicably full. When spring returned, Padraig noticed something curious about the rowan tree, where he had been leaving coins all winter. Tiny flowers now blossomed, flowers with petals of pure gold that tinkled softly in the breeze. As Padraig stood marveling, Finnegan appeared seated comfortably on a low branch. "Well, Cobbler, do you still regret not getting my pot of gold?" "No regrets," Padraig replied with a warm smile. "Your gift was far greater than any pot of gold could have been." "You've used it well," Finnegan nodded approvingly. "Your offering has been accepted by the fairy court, and your kindness to those in need has been noted. Their gold flowers are interest on your investments. Each one is worth more than any coin in your human realm. You may take one, just one, whenever true need arises." "Then I am rich?" Padraig asked in wonder. "In all the ways that matter," the leprechaun agreed. "But remember, wealth hoarded grows tarnished and dull. Wealth shared multiplies like flowers, bringing joy beyond counting." With those words and a tip of his buckled hat, Finnegan vanished, leaving only a faint scent of wild mint and distant laughter on the morning breeze. Padraig lived many more years, his magical thimble never failing, the golden flowers always providing exactly what he needed when true need arose. He never became what the world would call wealthy, but he lived contentedly and happy, sharing his prosperity as readily as he shared his craft. And on special nights when the moon hung full and the bright, keen-eyed villagers might spot an elderly cobbler and a tiny man in green working side by side on shoes fit for both human feet and fairy feet. You know, friends, I still keep my eyes open for signs of those little wee folk especially when I'm in gardens with mushroom rings and forests with gnarled old trees, perfect for tiny doors. Oh, that's another story I must tell you. When I walked through a real enchanted forest in the mountains near my home. It's true. Would you like to hear it? But the story of Padraig and Finnegan reminded us of something important. When we look for treasure, we might be focusing on the wrong kind of gold. The brightest treasures aren't always the ones that fill our pockets. They're the ones that fill our hearts and make us happy. The gold of friendship, of sharing our talents, of making someone else's journey a little easier. That's magic that multiplies the more we give it away. If you enjoyed the Leprechaun's Gold and you would like to hear more about the Enchanted Forest, please tap that like button and subscribe to our storytelling community. Maybe you have found something that seemed magical. I have. Or maybe you used your special talents to help someone else. I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if you like leprechauns, I also have some t-shirts with leprechauns with special messages. There's a link in the description. Come see the many t-shirts from all of our stories. Until next time, may you always see beyond the obvious sparkle to find the true gold in your life. And keep your eyes open for wee folk. You never know where they might be watching.